we want our students to be doing these 4 things within the first 5 minutes. Then we want them to spend about 30 minutes developing topic sentences and developing paragraphs. And can you put all the text up on the screen, I think, please? There we go. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so, writing task 2. It's the same for academic and general training. It is an academic essay. Yeah? No difference. The topics and the wording of the general training questions might be slightly less complex, but the output that examiners are looking for is exactly the same. We want an academic essay. It should have a minimum of 250 words, but as I said, we don't count the words. But 250 words is a good amount to aim for. 250 to 300, I usually tell my students. If it's 240 or 230, but it's a good essay, it will not be penalised for being under length. So what do they need to include? It's a very simple format. These are the 3 elements that must be there. It must have an introduction, it must have a main body. This could be 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs, doesn't really matter. But it must have a main body and it must have a conclusion. And do be aware that in task 2, paragraphing is assessed. For example, if paragraphing is not so good, you can never get a band 8, because one of the positive band descriptors for coherence and cohesion at band 8 is good paragraphing. So paragraphing is important in task 2. Okay, moving on then. What are test takers asked to do? If you could bring up all of those things. I think it's 4 things that they're asked to do. There they are. Or it could be a combination of these 4 things. So this is, if you like, the functional language for writing task 2. Problems and solutions, that sort of language. Opinions, very important. Comparing and contrasting, very important, and evaluating and challenging. So this is the sort of language, the functional academic language, if you like, that we need to be teaching our students in order for them to succeed at task 2. Okay. So let's have a look at 14 ideas. What a lot of ideas for teaching writing task 2. Let's have a look at the first one. Stop there, can you go back? Yeah. Okay, so the first idea is to use process writing. Now, process writing has nothing to do with writing about a process in academic task 1. Nothing to do with that. This is something completely different. Does anyone know what process writing methodology is? Yes, please. Oh, sorry, it's gone off. I'll put it back on.
Thank you. Simply going.
We want our students to be doing these 4 things within the first 5 minutes. Then we want them to spend about 30 minutes developing topic sentences and developing paragraphs. And finally, we want them to spend about 5 minutes proofreading, which might be quite difficult to get them to do because they don't like doing it for some unknown reason. Really, these checklists that we looked at previously, they can really help. It's more specific than the internet. It's even more specific than that. It's that socializing on the internet is increasing. Okay, it's increasing. That's the topic.
Connecting with other people.
It could be, but I think it's the socializing. I mean, you might want to mention that in your essay, but I think the topic is
communication.
Using the internet to socialize is increasing. That's the topic. What are the two issues connected with that topic?
Isolated.
Yeah, it makes some people say it makes negative consequences. Discuss both these views and give your opinion. What is the topic? Yes, exactly. It's computers are becoming more intelligent than us. What are the issues? Yeah, again, it's positive development, negative consequences, and the instructions. Discuss both views and give your opinion. Again, 3 elements. I think it's a good idea to get your students to count the elements of the instructions. In this case, there's 3. Yeah? Positive, negative, your opinion. So get them to say as a number, how many things do you need to cover? In this case, 3. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 6.
Could it be 1?
It's rarely 1, no.
You are
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, it could be 1. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay, yes sir, you had a question. Not a great deal of detail, but they should be aware of the concept. So I think we must encourage them to have this general knowledge. I encourage my students who have this problem, like they're not thinking about topics that may come up in IELTS. And it's not that these topics are complicated, it's maybe that they haven't really thought about them. That's all. So we need language. The idea here is not that we're improving their vocabulary or improving their reading, but that we are helping them to generate ideas. So encourage them to look at news, current affairs, latest things in a wide range of media. The media does not need to be in the English language. What we want is a build-up of ideas rather than a build-up of language. That's the purpose of this. So do encourage them to use the media. Tell them that it will be easier for them to generate ideas in their essays if they have a broad, general knowledge of the type of topics that come up again and again in IELTS writing. Okay, next then. In Lakes, it was about sea-going boats. And myself and my fellow examiners, we felt that this was a bit unfair on Nepali people, since Nepal is a landlocked country and there isn't any sea. And we complained to Cambridge, and Cambridge said all of our questions are tested and verified as fair, and we disagree with you. And that was it. So, no, Cambridge would, and I think IDP and British Council, they would say, no, it doesn't happen. And yeah, I think that's what they would say. Yeah, in reality. Yeah, even if you have a valid point, I would say in reality, if you were to make a complaint, that's probably what's going to happen, even if your point is valid. Yeah. Okay. Agree. So the way you use tables here, or doesn't have to be a table, you could just write it on the board. Is this? Let's have a look. So, positive consequences of providing free university education to higher achievers, negative consequences of the same, and reasons why it's fair, reasons why it's not fair. Those are the 4 elements that the student needs to write about in that essay. So what you do with this entertainment personality should get higher salaries. Discuss both these views and give your opinion. So 1 or 2 minutes to think and discuss. There are 2 headings here that I would give my students on a table or write on the board in order to make notes and generate ideas and organise information for this essay. What do you think those 2 headings are? So they do that. This is what we have to discourage them for doing, because it's not only about reading for detail. IELTS is testing if they can skim read and scan read. And I find all over the world that the biggest problem students have is that they do not read fast enough. They don't skim fast enough and they don't scan fast enough. So I think one of the biggest jobs we have as IELTS teachers when we're trying to develop reading skills for IELTS is to improve their reading speeds. So a lot of the activities that we're going to look at now are all about reading more efficiently and finding information more quickly to save time for thinking about the answers to the questions. So, let's first of all define those terms. What do we mean by skimming? What does IELTS mean by skimming? Any ideas?
Concise.
Yes, sir.
Concise.
To say, in a very short amount of time, I know roughly what that text is about. That's the purpose of skim reading. Scanning is very different. What's scan reading?
Looking for the specific information.
Exactly. Scan reading is looking for a particular piece of information that you need in order to answer a question. I always tell my students that scan reading is like looking at a bus timetable, for example, or a television guide, for example, when you want to know the time of a program that's on. You don't start at the beginning and read the bus timetable right through to the end. No, you look for the name of your destination and you look for the time of your bus. So scan reading is looking for some very specific information. Let's have a look then at some things you can do in class in order to develop these skills and how you can apply these different types of reading skills to different IELTS type questions. Let's have a look. How many activities do we have? We've got 10 activities or ideas for developing reading skills. Let's look at the first one. Okay, so this and indeed many of these reading activities you can also use for the listening test. You can also use when you're looking at listening questions. So this session cuts through the two. And the first thing that I always do when I'm looking at an IELTS question is I use the rubric to make sure they've understood what to do. Let's have a look at a rubric so I can explain what I'm talking about. Yeah, we can move on. Let's have a look at the first rubric. It's a bit small. It says, complete the table below. Choose no more than 3 words from the passage for each answer. Write your answers in boxes 9 to 13 on your answer sheet. Now, every time something like this comes up in class, I do a very quick activity to get the students into the habit of reading this carefully. Because, of course, if they don't read the rubric carefully, they could lose marks unnecessarily. If they write a word instead of a letter, they'll lose a mark. If they've been told to write a number and they write a word, they'll lose a mark. If they've been told to write 3 words and they only write 2 words, they'll lose a mark. So it's important that we train them to get into the habit of reading these rubrics carefully. And you can do so with this very short activity. So, first of all, can you use 4 words to complete the table? No. Can you use 2 words to complete the table? Can you use 1? They're not producing anything, yeah? They don't need to produce these vocabulary items. They just need to understand them. And most language learners have a much larger, in fact most native speakers in different languages, we have a much, much larger passive vocabulary than an active vocabulary. So this is what we're talking about here. Let's have a look at the activity. It's a list of headings. It's a match headings type question. So just looking at that, the first thing you do with your students is say, okay, from this list of headings, what do you think are the main key words?
Robots.
Robots has got to be one of them, hasn't it? It's repeated several times. Yeah, absolutely. Any more?
Newspapers.
Yeah, newspapers, technology.